The chime of the bell beckons us into sacred time. Good morning and welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston, a congregation that welcomes you no matter what you look like or who you love, and no matter how you practice spirituality. Because we know we need not think alike to love alike. We extend a heartfelt and inclusive welcome this morning to all who wish to join us for meaningful worship and service to the world. We greet all of you who join us this morning, those in our sanctuary and those who are joining us online. Así como el creciente número de participantes bilingües que nos acompañan desde sus hogares. Please note that the responses that have been found in the past in your order of service can now be found in laminated cards in your hymnal. There are easy-to-use icons in the order of service to help you find the corresponding response. While mask wearing is currently optional, you're encouraged to continue to wear one if you feel more comfortable doing so. And now please join Dr. Rock for our first hymn.
Good morning. I invite you to open your gray hymnals to number 224. And after you find it, if you would rise in body or in spirit and join as we sing together.
Let Christmas come, its lovely song, when evening soon and night is long. We are approaching the longest night of the year, and we approach a day of new births and new beginnings. We look forward to casting aside last year's calendar to replace it with a framework to hold fresh opportunities. The dawn breaks through the darkness with a promise of new life. During this time of anticipation, we reflect on the lessons we must learn to seize these new opportunities and the lessons we will learn because of them. During this time of anticipation, we feel the sun on our faces as it coaxes forth the potential within the seeds that have been planted, both within the ground and within us. We join together and turn our faces toward the sun. Come, let us worship together. The days approaching the solstice and the advent of Christmas. Inspired by the neo-pagan tradition, the first Sunday of December, we lit a candle in the south, honoring the element of fire. Fire burns away the old and creates space for the new. We kindle that flame again this morning. Next, we lit a candle in the east, symbolic of the element of air. Air gives the gift of breath and of spirit. Without it, we are not. Today, we light a candle in the West, a candle for water. We are all born of water. We come from the watery wombs of our mothers. Watery blood flows through our veins, sustaining us. Like life, water ebbs and flows. Blessed be.
Our young people are a very important part of our congregation. We love the energy and inquisitiveness that you bring to us. Young people, you're about to go out and learn and make new friends. So remember that we love you. We're excited that you're the future of this congregation. This morning, Reverend Scott and his husband Conrad will be joining the middle school youth as they learn about many different kinds of families. So please join with me in singing the words to send them off to religious education found in your order of service. Please join with me in the spirit that some call prayer and others name meditation. Open yourself to the wonders and the mysteries of the world. Open yourself to compassion and empathy. Take a breath. Take another. Center yourself. Spirit of life, that some name God and others call the highest in human aspiration, Be with us in this hour as we worship together. Remind us to lift up that which is of permanent worth, the human spirit, the wonder of art, the glory of nature, the joy of companionship, the thirst for justice. While we come to make peace with letting go of what is transient, the words we use, the ritual we share, what exists only for a generation. O Spirit of life, this holiday season, call us to celebrate those things of permanent worth, and in doing so, help us to grow ever stronger in connection to the glorious all that is. That it might be so, I invite the congregation to say, Amen. We pause now together to lift up that which sits heavy and light upon our hearts. Albert Pasio's mother suffered a health incident last week and is recovering in a skilled nursing facility. And just this morning we learned that Albert suffered a heart attack and is recuperating in the hospital. We send them both prayers and wishes for quick and complete recoveries. Flossie Bodie, wife of former Minister Bruce Bodie, continues treatment for ovarian cancer, and we wish her the speediest of recoveries as well. The memorial service for church member Shirley Holmes will be held this afternoon in the sanctuary at 3 o'clock. She asked that in lieu of flowers, donations be made in her memory to the congregation's endowment, the Houston Audubon Society, or the Nature Conservancy. We now turn to a practice inspired by African, indigenous, and neo-pagan traditions. We say aloud or bring to mind those who wish to be held in the loving embrace of this religious community. In this great cloud of witness and memory, amid this beloved community, we hear these names and hold them in our hearts. Let us also extend our empathy to all of the suffering and celebrate all of the joy that is amid and among this community which has not been named. We pause in awe and wonder of the beauty, diversity, and mystery that is life. In the spirit of love, in the spirit of hope, and in the spirit of compassion, I invite each of you into a time of silent prayer, meditation, or reflection.
Good morning. Each week, our morning offering is shared with organizations that share our Unitarian Universalist values and through which we may live out our principles in the world. This week, we are pairing two organizations toward a common goal, Child Advocates and Montrose Grace Place. To tell us about this opportunity to donate to help children and youth, we welcome church members Craig Ottinger and Marianne Cheslock to tell us more.
Good morning. For the last 30 years, Harris County courts have been appointing trained child advocates to act for the children that are in foster care, to make sure their needs are provided, to make sure they're in a safe environment, and that they feel that they have someone to turn to and has their voice. We usually collect toys, and this year we've decided to focus on the teenagers by giving them gift cards so they can learn the responsibility for how they choose to spend it and have that little bit of control about what they choose to do with it. I thank you for your generosity. Please know that it's greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Good morning. This is the second week that our offering will be shared by Montrose Grace Place. Last week I spoke of the group's mission, which is to provide a safe, welcoming environment for vulnerable youth of all sexualities and genders who are experiencing homelessness. The group provides nourishment, healthy relationships, and hope for the future. Today I want to talk about that first goal, safe place. I want to tell you a dramatic story about that work. But my task is difficult because the story I'm about to tell you, not much happens in it. You need to understand that homeless youth are always threatened by hunger, weather, and people who want to use their bodies. One response is to gather together in groups for protection, that is, to join a gang. Now, gangs have colors, and youth are not allowed to wear gang colors when they're at Montrose Grace Place. If a youth comes in to a meal wearing, say, a red or a green shirt, we take them to the clothes closet and give them a white t-shirt to cover up. Gang membership is one reason we always have a security guard on duty when we're open. Well, one night several years ago, this church provided the meal and a creative activity for after the meal. In this case, it was adult coloring books with magic markers. The youth loved this activity. The typical page might have a chrysanthemum with, say, 500 petals. And we had several sets of magic markers, but in order to control the flow of the supplies, we let each youth have just 3 colors. They could share markers, and when they were finished with those 3 or 6 or whatever, they could trade them in for new colors. I walked around for a while, making sure everyone had the supplies they needed, and I landed up sitting at a table with 2 young men who were intently and carefully coloring detailed drawings. They talked while they worked, and shared their colors, but the focus for each one of them was on careful coloring. At one point, one of the men got up from the table and went to trade in their 6 markers in exchange for new colors. And that's my story. That's all that happened. After the youth had left, the staff and volunteers gathered together for a debriefing. One staff member said, "Well, that was the damnedest thing I ever saw." And another staff member responded, "I couldn't believe it." Of course, I had no idea what was going on. One of the staff explained, "Do you realize, Craig, that you were sitting with leaders of 2 rival gangs?" And of course I hadn't. From the little I know, being a leader of a gang has crushing responsibilities, particularly if you're 18 years old or 20 years old. You're a one-person social service agency trying to keep your people sheltered, fed, safe, and together. That night, 2 gang leaders, who knew each other because they were rivals, were able to put their burdens down and become simply young people having fun. They could drop their street responsibilities because they were safe at Montrose Grace Place. Safety is one of the precious gifts Montrose Grace Place offers homeless youth. Please support this work. Thank you.
Those in our sanctuary will find the instructions for text giving in the order of service. And those watching the live stream will see the instructions on your screen. Our regular Sunday offering collection invites us to weave a tapestry of love and action. We ask that you give generously. An offering now will be received.
I invite you to say the words to dedicate our offering found in the insert card. To the work of this church, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives and these our offerings.
Our first reading today is entitled Morning Star by Joy Harjo. The red dawn now is rearranging the earth, thought by thought, beauty by beauty. Each sunrise a link in the ladder, thought by thought, beauty by beauty. The ladder is the backbone of shimmering deity, thought by thought, beauty by beauty. Child stirring in the web of your mother, do not be afraid. Old man turning to walk through the door, do not be afraid. Here ends the reading.
Our second reading is from The Dawn of Everything, A New History of Humanity by David Graeber and David Wengrow. We are projects of collective self-creation. What if we approached human history that way? What if we treat people from the beginning as imaginative, playful creatures who deserve to be understood as such? What if instead of telling a story about how our species fell from some idyllic state of equality, we ask how we came to be trapped in such tight conceptual shackles that we can no longer even imagine the possibility of reinventing ourselves? Here ends the second reading.
And now I invite you to open your gray hymnals to number 38. Please rise in body or in spirit and join as we sing together. Morning has broken. Morning has broken.
This past summer, I had the opportunity to visit Perugia, Italy. My time there provided me the chance to reflect upon what is transient and what is permanent about religion, and what it is exactly so many of us celebrate this time of year. Perugia is a relatively minor city in northern Italy, about 2 hours north of Rome. If you've heard of it, it's probably only because it was the site of a crime that grabbed international attention about a decade back. I know it because I have a friend who lives there. We were in graduate school together, and after we graduated, I headed here and he headed there. He's an Italian citizen who directs a study abroad program that connects students from the United States to Italian academic institutions. My friend's position has prompted him to learn almost everything there is to know about Perugia. Walking through it with him is an experience. It's not a large city. Located on top of a small mountain, it is a winding maze that spills down the high ground into the flat land that surrounds its historic heart. And what a historic heart it is. As a settlement, Perugia dates back well over 2,000 years. The walls built by the Etruscans, the civilization that came before the Roman Empire, still stand. Despite multiple invasions and numerous internal conflicts, their stone continues to ring the city. It's possible to walk through a rock-carved gate that has changed little from when Caesar Augustus restored it after one of Rome's many civil wars. Moving through the city is like traveling through time. There's an inn where the great writer Alexander Dumas stopped. Over here, we find a ring affixed to the old city hall. It's what remains of the city's stocks. On the other side of the building, the Via della Gabbia, the street of cages where the condemned once were placed on display for all to see. This way we find something far less gruesome. It's a fabled fountain. Built in the 12th century, it celebrates the now vanished wealth of the city's once merchant elite. An incredible feat of engineering, it draws water uphill without the use of any pumps. There are statuettes for much of what used to be good about Perugia: fig harvests and freshwater fish, wine and plows, astronomy and philosophy, the old crafts and the ones that have endured. Come this way and we can see some of the few remaining marks of Mussolini. There's a stone symbol that's been set up too high that it can be defaced. And there are bullet holes to remind us of the struggles between the black shirts and the anti-fascists, and the rest of the fascist symbols have been broken down back into stone. But something you might find particularly interesting is the big cathedral that sits in the center of the city. It's right at the top of the plaza, right by the fountain and across from the ancient city hall. Here's the thing about the cathedral. The building itself is not that old, well, at least by Italian standards. It was completed a scant 700 years ago. But the site itself used to be a Roman temple dedicated to Athena. And before that, it was an Etruscan one. And prior to that, well, archaeologists think that it's been some sort of sacred site since whenever it was human beings first came to live on top of the mountain. They probably gathered here to worship the sun. The earliest languages and stories that were used to bless this place have all been forgotten. The holy whispers that gave the mountaintop its first names have vanished into the wind. But there remains something about the spot here at the highest point where you can climb the steps and gaze down the plaza, watch the young communists sell their newspapers while a jazz band strikes up and the venerable and the fashionable sip their espressos, and see life play out. Standing on the steps next to my friend as he described the city he loved and reflected on the religious mysteries that have disappeared into the temporal fog reminded me of a story related by the great Italian philosopher Giorgio Agamben. He learned it from a scholar of Jewish mysticism named Gershom Scholem, who in turn learned it from a Nobel laureate, who in turn learned it from his father, who was probably a rabbi. And his father may have been told it by one of the characters in the story, Rabbi Israel of Rishin, a mystic from 19th century Ukraine. The story might be familiar to a couple of you. I shared it in another sermon some years back, and it runs something like this. Long ago, when the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the spiritual movement within Judaism known as Hasidism, faced a difficulty, he would go into the woods. There was a certain sacred place. When he reached it, he would light a fire and pray. And the difficulty that he struggled with would be overcome. When he died, his disciple would go to the same place. And he would say, we can no longer light the fire, but we can pray. And his difficulty would be averted. Now, the Baal Shem's disciple died, and his disciple, the third generation, traveled to the place in the woods. And when his time came, he said, we can no longer light a fire, nor do we know the secret meditations belonging to the prayers, but we know the place in the woods, and that can be sufficient. And so it was that it came to be Rabbi Israel of Rishin's turn. A disciple of the fourth generation, his master, the disciple of the third generation, had somehow failed to tell him where the place in the woods was. And so all he could do was say, we cannot light the fire, We cannot speak the prayers, we do not know the place, but we can tell the story of all of this. And in the tale that is told, that was sufficient. Now, in the philosopher's interpretation of the story, this is what happens. Once there was a mystery, let's call it fire, to which the great spiritual teachers of the past had access. In Hebrew, the words Baal Shem Tov mean the master of God's good name, and the Baal Shem is reputed to have been one who was so blessed that he could speak directly with the divine and commune with the angels themselves. But over time, the connection to the mystery, the story suggests, has been lost. Rather than the mystery, only the legend of it remains. It's not a bad metaphor for the way many people approach revelation, the divine breaking into the world, the opening up of possibilities beyond what is deemed possible. In many accounts, revelation is described as something that happened once upon a time. It's no longer ongoing. Most scriptures are meant to recount miracles that happened long ago, not ones that are happening right now. All we are left with in them is the stories. This is one version of the secular, the absence of the sacred. And I should note that my friend is not religious. Neither was anyone else I met while staying with him. The Catholic cathedral for them is an almost archaic curiosity. It's the site of something that once meant a great deal to so many, but with each passing generation is losing more of its significance. Yet at the same time, the cathedral set much of the city's civic pattern. Or rather, the sacred space that it occupies has shaped the city's very marrow. While few people continue to attend the Catholic Church, the building itself remains the center of Perugia's social life. Follow any of the winding streets uphill, and you will eventually arrive at the worn-out stone steps. There's something from the story of Agamben, our philosopher, and the enduring way in which the cathedral shapes the structure of the city, which is suggestive to me of the holiday experience at this time of year. Do you have a sense of that? This is a time of year when so many people celebrate Christmas in a fashion that bespeaks of secularization, the evacuation of the religious from the ritual. The present incarnation of Santa Claus is almost an invention of 20th century capitalism. The winter holiday has as much to do with consumerist consumption as it does with any celebration of revelation. The glitz, the sparkle, the incessant refrain of holiday sales are almost enough to make me sympathetic to the old New England Puritans' desire to do away with the Christmas holiday. They viewed it as a great dishonor of God and a distraction from authentic religious practice. Bah humbugging aside, for a lot of people, Christmas does not have all that much to do with Christianity. Looking at the bright lights and decorated trees, hearing songs about Rudolph and Frosty, I can understand where the evangelicals get their demand that we put the Christ back in Christmas. Not that as a Unitarian Universalist, I have much sympathy for them. Our tradition has long attempted to separate what is transient from religion from what is permanent or enduring. And we've concluded that particular forms of religion, the forms that religion take, are transient. They shift from generation to generation, but that the religious desire is permanent. Back to our cathedral. Located as it is on a spot deemed sacred for 100 generations. That space has been a place to encounter the holy, even as understandings of the nature of the holy have shifted across time. The earliest sun worshipers gathered there. We know not exactly what they did, but perhaps we can imagine their rituals, perhaps coming together in a circle at the turning of the year, keeping vigil and waiting for the return of the sun on the darkest night. Then came the veneration of Etruscan gods and goddesses, deities who are quite similar to those found in Greek mythology. They were replaced by veneration of Athena, immortal patron of wisdom and warfare. In time, she gave way to the Christians' crucified Christ. And now the spirit of the city has turned to some kind of humanism, where celebrations and daily rituals are tied as much to celebrating human beauty and what we make as anything else. These days, Perugia is best known for its international jazz and chocolate festivals, both of which occur right in front of the cathedral. The transient and the permanent, the slowly shifting significance of the site of the cathedral, Agamben's story, what do they suggest to you? To me, they suggest that there is something, we can name it fire if we wish, or the holy spark within, that we seek to connect with. The rituals we use to seek that connection may shift over time, but the desire remains the same. I detect this sentiment in Joy Harjo's fine poem, Morning Song. There she writes of the possibility inherent in the red dawn, and how that possibility, that sacred moment, is present for the child stirring in the web of your mother, and the old man turning to walk through the door. For each, she suggests, there is something sacred to be found in the world. For each, she implies, that something will be slightly different. Each sunrise a link in the ladder, not quite a repetition of what came before. Rabbi Israel of Ishin could only tell stories of the fire. The story was sufficient for him, but I suspect we focus on the stories of fire. When we focus exclusively on the stories of the fire, we get caught into old patterns. It's one of the geniuses of Unitarian Universalism that we are not locked into only the old stories. We do not just have to tell the stories of someone else's fire. As I reminded you last week, in our tradition, we teach that revelation is not sealed. The fire is something that we each can kindle. The stories of others can offer us a guide, but we have the capacity to light a new flame. We do so every week when we spark our chalice. And we do so when we gather to imagine how religion and the world might both be different. In their recent book, The Dawn of Everything, David Graeber and David Wengrow repeatedly encourage their readers to probe what is, in essence, an essential Unitarian Universalist teaching. We are projects of self-creation. The Etruscan Mount, Athena's temple, the cathedral, Agamben's story, and this sermon are each things that have been brought into being, each reflections of the rituals of worship of a particular generation. There's nothing about them that is fixed. We Unitarian Universalists are changing our liturgies of worship all the time. The words spoken in this sanctuary today are not the same kind of words that would have been spoken here 2 or 3 generations ago. The service we hold in 10 days' time for the winter solstice is a different kind of ritual than the one observed by the founders of this congregation. And yet there is something in common with all of them. Call it a desire for experience of the divine, call it the search for community, call it a quest for spirituality, a connection to something greater than ourselves, the creation of a shared story. Whatever you want to name that mystery, it persists. With their book, David Graeber and David Wengrow try to prompt people to be more open to the vast set of different ways that human beings have used to organize our societies over time. They hope to get us to recognize that both things have not always been the way they are now, and that we can imagine new possibilities for the future. The civic building that sits across from Perugia's cathedral is as good a reminder of this as the sacred mount itself. Over the millennia, the city has been an independent republic, part of the Roman Empire, ruled by merchant princes, run democratically, controlled by aristocrats, a vassal of the Pope, and a portion of the nation of Italy. The transient and the permanent. I've said all of this because at the winter holidays, at the turning of the year, we each are challenged to reflect upon what is transient and permanent in our lives. How will this holiday season be similar to ones that have passed for you? How will it be different? These questions can be difficult to face. They can remind us of those who have gone before. They can also be times of celebration when we celebrate what is enduringly permanent in our lives, a sense of fellowship, a sense of love. But the world is ever shifting, and little is permanent. What is lifted up in one generation might be forgotten in another. So I end my sermon with an invitation and a blessing. The invitation is this. I invite this today to be an opportunity to reflect upon what is transient and what is permanent about the holiday season. What is it that endures year after year, generation after generation? What do you hold on to from your childhood? What do you want to pass on to those who will come next? What do you want to let go of? What connects you with the highest, the sacred, and what does not? What is important to you at this time of year, and what is not? The transient and the permanent. Our Unitarian Universalist tradition invites you to ask and answer these questions. Instead of taking the holiday as set, we recognize that it is much like the Mount of Perugia, changing over time but still centered on some mystery, be it the mystery of the divine, the mystery of human beauty, or the mystery of another sunrise. The blessing. O Spirit of life, known by many names, may we each, in our own way, find something
Thank you
of the
so much
holy,
for watching our
something of the permanent this holiday season and in each of the days of our lives. That it may be so, I invite the congregation to say Amen.
To open your hymnals, the teal ones, to number 1057, Go Lift It Up. Please rise in body or in spirit and join as we sing together.
Please find the words to extinguish the flame on your card, and let us read them together. Thank you. We extinguish the flame but not the light of truth, the warmth of commitment, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Let us leave this. Oh, sorry.
Wrong one. I'm just totally.
Okay. There's always a mystery. Let us leave this place blessed by love, blessed by the sun, the stars, and the moon, lifted up and celebrating that which is permanent, however we choose to name it. Go in peace, go in love. May our lives be a blessing. Amen. Thank you so much for watching our service today. We're glad you're part of our online community, where we welcome people who are diverse in faith, ethnicity, history, as well as gender identity and sexual orientation. There are many different ways you can get involved in our community. One you can do right now is by clicking like below or subscribing to our channel. If you're interested in joining our congregation, please email us at membership@firstuuhouston.org. Thanks so much for joining us.